To the holder of this letter, my commendations. Solving the puzzle of the chest required more than considerable deductive powers.
Man, it is so interesting to see you in person, 2019 version, having just seen the 2000 version. Like your last episode, the last 4 seconds was right before I made this call. And it's like seeing into the future, and the future is good. So, yeah.
Did you grow up in Canada? Were you alive in the 90s? Did you love YTV? Fuck yeah, you did!
How old were you when you started in that show? Because to me, as a 34-year-old man, I'm like, look at these babies. You're supposed to be at school. I'm used to my teenagers being played by 20-year-olds. Like, what's going on?
I was 12 when we started filming. Yeah. So I worked the show from when I was 12 until I was 16. That was the last season. And I mean, I feel the same way when I watch the first episodes or see, stills from the first season. And I'm just like, oh my God, look at the baby fat. Like John, my co-star who played Bo, looked completely different.
And when you go from season 1 to 2, John kind of looks like Tom Hanks when he starred in Big,
Yep.
like all of a sudden, it's like, who's this man? Yeah.
I know it's pretty trippy, and there is I think a level of cruelty, but also hopefully creates a sense of humility when you go through puberty on camera.
All right, so God, you're 12 years old. What was the audition process like? Where did they see like hundreds of people? Like, where were you? What did you feel like?
Well, at that point, I was still living in Ottawa, and so I did a self-tape. Those were the days when we sent VHSs. Dating myself there. And I'm not exactly sure how many people they auditioned. I know it was cross Canada, so I don't remember there being a number. But I auditioned a couple times, and then they flew me to Winnipeg, which is where it was shot, and where both production companies were based at the time. And actually, interesting fact, Kim Todd, who was probably one of the most important people behind the scenes for the show in creating it and keeping and maintaining what it was, is now a producer on Fargo. But yeah, so they flew me out there, and they had me audition with three people who were down to the wire for Bo. And I think they had one or potentially two other girls for my role. I can't remember. But interestingly enough, one of the other contenders for the part of Bo was actually Brendan Fletcher, who played Stink.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine auditioning. Imagine being like, hey, I'm going for a lead for a show. It's like, oh, you didn't get it, but you can try out to be Stink. Like, imagine. Oh, God.
Honestly, I think Brendan preferred it.
Okay.
It fit his sense of personality at the time. He's definitely not as prankstery as Stink was, but I think he enjoyed kind of, he's such a great actor. I mean, he's still around, but he was really interested in exploring, as big as you can get. And I don't think you can get a bigger character than Stink's personality on Shirley. Well,
speaking of personality and big, like to be Shirley, you had to be very concentrated, very calculated. But you're 12. You must have had energy bursting out of you at all times. And I'm talking to you now. You're not 12 anymore, and you have a shit ton of energy. I'm assuming back then there was this energy as well. So, did they ever tell you it's like, okay, less? Were you like coached into act like you're 40?
Here you go, Molly. It's your downfall every time. The lyrics to Power, the first letter of every line spells Molly. If it weren't for that clue, I wouldn't have thought to search your room. That's where I found the same soap used to poison the oysters. And this came off your printer.
I'm an introvert naturally, and a fairly quiet personality, despite the fact that I went into the arts and the performing arts. I'm a bit of a hider, so it kind of really fit with Shirley. Of course, she did it for different reasons so that she could be an observer and whatnot, but really that's what introverts do. I was a big reader from a really young age, so I felt like an old soul to a certain extent.
All right, so what's it like to get that call? Be like, you're Shirley Holmes, you're the star of a TV show, a kid from Canada, 12-year-old from Ottawa.
It was pretty unbelievable. Like I had done 2 projects beforehand, Song Spinner, where I was a lead in like a TV movie, and then an episode of Goosebumps. So I had the experience to not necessarily be as intimidated as I could have been, but holy crap, I was over the moon. I had no idea what was coming, but it was. I mean, I danced around the house for probably a couple hours, and I didn't know what to do with myself.
What are you doing here anyways, huh? Your chauffeur late?
If you'd studied my appearance, you'd know why I was late. Same way that I know that you've never been to a private school before. You live on the south side. You work cleaning fish, and you're colorblind.
Lucky guesses.
All right, so what was it like meeting the person that you will spend every episode with for the next 4 years, Mr. John White? Like, you're 12, he's 13, I guess, around the same age.
Yeah, I think he's 2 years.
Girls mature faster than boys, so what was your initial meeting like? As actors.
It was good. I mean, the first time we met was pretty much like right before we went into the room to run the lines, so there wasn't much kind of getting to know you or whatever. But I really liked his energy. I don't know, like he was really present in his character and in the moment, and that was really cool. I hadn't seen that in a lot of young actors. But getting to know him afterwards was great. I mean, he became kind of like an older brother, and with all the good and bad that comes with it, where there were days where we were having fun, and then other days where it's like, God damn it, John. I'm sure he had many with me. Mostly I was jealous of the fact that we would go into the hair and makeup trailer. He would get to sleep in longer because I had long hair. And so they would take like an hour just blow drying it just to make it look like Shirley just woke up. Whereas he'd come in and they go, oh, okay, you're good.
Oh, man. Okay, so it's interesting. I found with this series, it's like when you see all these shows and you see guy meets girl, girl meets guy, it's like, when are they going to get together? And they don't. And that's actually kind of refreshing. I think you guys paved the way for proper platonic friendships that Twilight would later destroy, Right. Yeah. You could just be friends.
Yeah, that was one thing that, that was the question we probably got the most, are Beau and Shirley going to get together someday? And, despite the fact that once you get to know characters, that there is that part of you that wants, them to be more, simply because I think, we're trained by society, as you said, that if a male and a female are connecting in any way, then that means that they should move forward. But yeah, that was one thing that was always kind of a known thing that was not going to happen, because, I mean, it would just, for one, that's not Shirley. Like, maybe she would eventually grow up and get married, but I, having that kind of interest was, let alone with her, her sidekick, her helper, she would know very well that would ruin it. And, and I think at that point, Beau would lose patience with her anyways.
After I noticed the smell of horse barn on your shirt.
What shirt?
The shirt in your locker.
You broke into my locker?
Yeah.
Stop treating me like I'm a specimen you put under your microscope. There is no mystery here. Just my life, my life. Why can't you just leave me alone?
I'm worried about you.
Yeah, you got a funny way of showing it.
So yeah, and that was one thing that Kim Todd was really intrinsic on, if I recall correctly, that she didn't want to fall into those, social norms that, I think all media gets into, but especially, youth media, because there's just so much talking down to and catering to the basest emotions, because those are the easiest things to sort of access, especially people whose hormones are raging and blah, blah, blah. So I think it was a really great part of the show that didn't happen.
I noticed that like the stakes were pretty high. Like all these cases, it started out with a fire and a homeless person almost being in said fire. And Ryan Gosling trying to kill you guys by locking you in a room and then lighting another building on fire. Like,
yep.
And you're thinking back, you're like, man, Canada in the 90s was badass, man. We just didn't care. Between Degrassi and Trailer Park Boys, we're like, The child endangerment means nothing to us.
But yeah, that was I think my favorite part of the show was how there was no underestimating the audience. Like, it's not that we tried to scare or tried to push the limits too hard. It was, we wanted to be something different, to actually tell stories. And, like with Shirley's character, there was never any giving on, oh, okay, well, she's getting older, so now let's make her girly, or, have her smile all the time, or be more, like the media says, with, smile more. With female professionals, and I personally think that was a huge part of the attraction, and one of the proudest things that I, as a female performer and as Shirley, was that I was able to show girls a character that was smarter than a lot of people, not apologetic about it, not mean about it.
6 right, 16 left, 22 right.
How did you know?
Observation.
Not that there wasn't any fear in approaching that. I mean, I wasn't enough behind the scenes. I don't know how hard they had to fight to keep that going, but I know that there were some fights.
Yeah. It's 1996. Like, sometimes we take advantage of, we forget, like, how inclusive things are now versus 1996, like, in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things were a little different. Like, Shirley never spent 3 days pining over a guy that broke up with her or got pregnant or anything. So this was a shining new light in the way things were to come. Yeah. I still remember one of the most interesting interactions I had with a fan. I think it was at the mall in Winnipeg while we were shooting, and they came up to me. I think there was like 2 or 3 of them, and they were like, "Wow, you look so different when you smile." I was like, huh? It's like, yeah, Shirley doesn't smile that much. I'm like, oh, yeah. I guess you're right. No wrinkles for me. Awesome.
Who needs moisturizing cream?
Yeah. What's an episode that really stands out to you after all these years that, you look back on and smile? I
have to say that probably one of my favorites, the ones that comes to mind, was the case of, I think it was King Arthur's Court. I always loved the episodes with Mr. Howie. Colin Fox is a fabulous person, and I loved the character. He was always so much fun to work with. But I really loved being able to go to a Renaissance fair in the show. I'm like a big historical fiction fan, fantasy. I'm a self-proclaimed nerd and proud of it. But I still, to this day, have never been to a Renaissance fair. Well,
speaking of Mr. Howie, I was looking at him, and I'm like, I know that face. So I look on IMDb, and sure enough, he is, I know Tommy Boy front to back.
Callahan has guaranteed every part sold since 1925.
Maybe so, but it's not on the box. It should always be on the box, comforting you, calling out, I'm good, I'll never let you down, but if I do, I'm going to make things all better.
And it goes to show, like, there's no small roles. There's only small actors, or big roles, big actors, because this guy totally, 20 years later, still engraved in my memory. I know his performance, I know his face, and it's this important scene, but to somebody just looking at a script of paper, they're like, I only have 7 lines. Mm-hmm. But, it depends how you do it. Because I remember that performance all these years later. So it was really nice to see him say more than 10 lines, Yeah.
Okay, I'll buy from you.
Oh, that's... What?
Yeah, that was actually one of my parents' favorite things to me when I was younger. They were really amazing in that they never pushed me. Like, this was always my decision. And they always told me you can leave anytime you want, regardless of, if you're in the midst of massive success or, you're floundering, you quit whenever and there will never be any judgment. But yeah, one of their big sayings was there are no small roles, only small actors. And I believe that truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
So you leave Thursday?
Yeah. Kind of nervous about it. I mean, what do I know about Ukraine?
You'll find out. I'm really happy for you, Bo.
Thanks. But there's still one problem.
What?
Without me around, who's going to get you out of trouble?
So shows come to an end and stuff like that. You do 4 seasons. And I read on Wikipedia, they said that part of the reason that the the show stopped is because the kids were getting older, and when the kids get older, the tone and subject matter of the show would have to change with their age. You know, probably you guys would have to deal with more Degrassi-ish things as kids do. Is that on your end how it happened, or did Canada say you made 60 episodes? We're not paying for any more.
Well, I think it was possibly a combination, because I do know that we struggled on both ends. There was from what I understand and what I remember, the structure was that the further along you get, like with each season, you get less and less money, which, makes sense if you're able to make a profit. But in Canada, especially at the time, that was fairly challenging. Merchandising is very expensive. Like, there wasn't that ability. So it wasn't realistic for our show to have a replacement for the money that was being lost. But I do know that there was definitely the concern about getting older, and you kind of see it in the fourth season in that there are some episodes that are kind of stretch the line.
The package.
They're not as realistic, normal, everyday, so to speak, stuff. We had a TV show come in, an episode with a star someone was trying to kill him, and
I'm cool, but the show sucks.
What he meant to say was that he's very delighted that he's shooting a very special episode of Cool Rules here with his Sussex Academy fan club. Yeah.
What he meant to say is that he'd rather eat nuclear waste than do another season.
He's always on. That's why I love this kid, but you have to get ready for another scene. But we'll set something else up for later.
And then, the witchcraft episode, and still good, but maybe not as strong and not as kind of solid. So I do know that they were starting to stretch, and I know that the producers didn't want to leave the show in a bad way. They wanted to stay strong, and rather than kind of pummel a dead horse, before you ever are willing to acknowledge, like, okay, wait, this is going down. They wanted to end strong.
Ironic that your dad in the show is a British man and you come from British heritage in the show, because that's what the British really do. They tend to stop their series before they have a chance to get really awful. Mm-hmm. And a good old America, they're like,
we'll have 12 sequels, a couple of offshoots.
Make season 11.
This is for you.
This is your journal.
It's as much yours as it is mine.
I don't know what to say.
Say you'll let me know if you see anything suspicious over there.
Hey. What about your next case?
Don't worry. Got it covered.
It was definitely sad. It's funny. I'm trying to remember, and I know there was a lot of sadness, and we really did become a family on the set, and there's some people I haven't seen since the last season, but it was so powerful to be in a show that was so loved too, and feeling like, even though it was going to end in terms of the actual shooting process and my involvement on the everyday, that it was still out there, and there were still people who remembered. And I still, to this day, get people reaching out to me and going, "Oh my God, I really loved your stuff," and even back home still. Yeah, it was great. I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Awesome. All right, so any crazy behind-the-scenes stuff ever happen that the fans don't know about? Tell me something Wikipedia doesn't know about the show.
Check out more episodes of You, Me, and YTV on Facebook and YouTube. Sweet one-of-a-kind interviews with PJ Fresh Phil, PJ Paul, Tarzan Dan, the cast of Student Bodies, the voice acting cast of Sailor Moon, and much, much more. Exclusively on You, Me, and YTV. Season 2.